The NFC Championship game. Many thought an overhaul to the replay system was coming, but at the league meetings this week, 2 instant replay changes were proposed, and neither would address this missed call. Both proposals would only allow for reviews of plays where a flag was thrown. Payton said, if the league doesn't make a change, then, quote, ownership is saying they're comfortable with what happened a year ago. He added, quote, there are those in television that think the drama is perfect.
Yep.
That's hard to take.
Yep.
So, Skip, we start with you here. Do you like the comments from Coach Payton?
I still get angry when I talk about this. I'm going to try to calm down a little bit.
Okay.
But I loved what Coach Payton said because I love the National Football League, and I don't want to see it lose any more credibility over a blown non-call next year or even the next year. And Sean Payton obviously still has an axe to grind because we know that his team got knocked out of the Super Bowl by the worst blown call in the history of sports. But Sean Payton is on the competition committee, and he realizes he needs to swing his axe that he's grinding at this antiquated system. He needs to swing it and keep swinging it through the whole offseason at a system so antiquated that it allowed such a monumental mistake to be made that tainted this year's Super Bowl. And I love Sean Payton's conclusion that Jenny just read. If ownership is not going to address this, and trust me, they will not address this.
No.
They'll pay lip service. They're going to discuss it today in Phoenix. Nothing will happen. Then his conclusion is, Sean Payton's, ownership is saying they're comfortable with what happened a year ago, meaning back on January 20th in the NFC Championship game.
Very comfortable.
They are comfortably uncomfortable because they're hoping against hope that these things will only come around every blue moon, you know, every Halley's Comet, or, you know, like it'll be every 10 years, 20 years, whatever, before this happens again. And I fear the worst. I fear that it's going to happen before then because I don't like where this is heading. And just for the record, just to quickly reiterate, NFC Championship game, Rams at New Orleans. It's 3rd and 10, Saints at the Rams' 13-yard line with 1:49 left. Scores tied at 20-all, and Drew Brees throws for one little Tommy Lee Lewis, right? And he looks to be so wide open that Nickel Roby Coleman decides, as he admitted later, I just have no choice. I just got to foul him, right? I got to interfere. And he blatantly interferes, so blatantly that he also goes helmet to helmet.
Correct.
So if you just throw the pass interference flag at the 5-yard line, you got 1st and goal at the 5 with 1:45 left. So let's say you run the ball 3 times, you milk the clock down to whatever and kick the field goal. You might give the Rams 20 seconds left with the football, maybe 18 seconds left. I don't think the Rams are going to win that game. By the way, you could just score a touchdown there, and then you'd have a much better chance of getting to the Super Bowl. And I think most of the known world decided that last year's Super Bowl was marred, that it was tainted, that the wrong team went. And you can argue with me that because Brady and Belichick went from the AFC for the 4th time in 5 seasons, that hurt a TV rating that was the worst in a decade. And I can argue right back to you that a lot of people turned off their TV for the Super Bowl because they were so turned off by the worst blown call, the worst non-call in sports history. So, as Jenny also pointed out, Sean Payton said there are those in TV that probably think that this drama sells. Jerry Jones is one of those proponents, and he's been the head of the TV committee. He believes that human frailty, as he calls it, in refereeing sells, that any publicity is good publicity, that controversy sells, and it rates. And I so disagree. I've disagreed with Jerry to his face again and again because that is wrong. Because if you are so wrong that your game looks corrupt, it loses credibility, it just looks weak and bad, then that's not good publicity. That's not good controversy. That's not selling. That's going to eat away at your popularity because your credibility will begin to fade. And I'll just say, I've been around so long that I saw baseball dominate the landscape. And then I saw football just eclipse baseball and just shove it into the backdrop, right?
Yes.
And now I'm feeling that the NBA is on the rise. It's just starting to feel like you got to be careful about these things. And I have advocated since that January 20th game that at least in the last 2 minutes, you got to have a fail-safe. You got to have an escape. You got to allow somebody in New York, Al Riveron, whoever it might be, or a replay official upstairs, just the last 2 minutes, even if you want to just make it for playoff games, you got to give somebody the ability to correct the obvious blown call. Not by challenge, not by coach's intervention. Somebody upstairs with half a brain who says, gee, guys, we just blew that one. We got to overturn that one. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You got to do it.
Can you imagine if there's no flag on the field and all of a sudden the referee comes over his mic and says we have a pass interference or we have a holding call?
Yeah,
and nobody
I can imagine if the whole known world last year would have said, thank you for saving the National Football League.
I disagree wholeheartedly with you and Sean Payton. Let me tell you why. Skip, in the 100-year history, if this had been a normal occurrence, in other words, like we saw the catch rule happening every single week, Calvin Johnson, Dez Bryant, Jesse James, this one or that one. Okay, you know what, Skip Bayless? We're starting to see this with far too great a frequency. Something needs to be done about this. But we've seen a call this egregious only one time since the merger, since they've been recording television. I can't go back 100 years because I don't even know if they had footage back then. But since we've been watching TV, as you and I know it, Skip, and you go back a lot further, you said you've never seen a call this egregious.
I thought the Mike Renfro, the Oilers
the toe touch.
It was the same. But go ahead.
If this was a normal occurrence, like the catch rule, Skip, I believe you'd be on to something. But because this has only happened once, let's just say in the Super Bowl era, what you said to Mike Renfro, so twice in the Super Bowl era, Skip, I don't believe, because what they're saying is that we do not want to review subjectivity, because that's what a flag is subjectivity. Now, it's egregious. You and I both, it happened in real time, and I said, that's a pass interference. I didn't need slow motion. Now, I didn't see the helmet to helmet. Now, once we came back to replay, I saw helmet to helmet. But, Skip, you cannot do that. And then you said, well, just make it the last 2 minutes. Let's just say what happens. If this happens. With 5 minutes left in the third quarter, an offensive lineman holds. They get a touchdown. That's not reviewable, but that's the difference in the ball game. I'm supposed to feel good about that because it didn't happen in the last 2 minutes?
It just depends how blatant it is. And this was the all-time blatant miscall. This was objectively subjective, because you're saying it's a subjective call, but the world believed it was objective, it just had to get made. Even the guy who committed the penalty said, I tried to...
Well, he was looking around like, man, there ain't no flags.
Okay, so it was so egregious and blatant that you have to have somebody upstairs who can say, okay, we missed that one. The holding, unless it's just blatant where there's a sack about to be had and a touchdown pass.
Oh, like the guy jumps offside? Like when the guy from the San Diego Chargers, remember, that guy ended up losing his job. The guy, the right tackle, moved and
But that was a regular season game. I'm just talking about games of this magnitude.
Well, it might have cost Cleveland a playoff spot.
Okay, but this is the one where we said it cost New Orleans a Super Bowl berth.
But here's the thing. That's one incident. If this was happening with greater frequency, I would agree with you, Skip. But because we haven't seen this in the last 4 decades, I can't take one isolated incident. Now, fumbles and INTs, yes, that's not subjective. But this right here, and granted, this was an egregious call, but can we go back and review Sean Payton play calling? You know, he did throw the ball on first down.
And do all kinds, and that game went to overtime because they did kick a field goal.
If you don't mind me asking, Skip, who got the ball first?
They had the ball. I'm just saying.
You mean to tell me Sean Payton with Drew Brees had the ball first?
Shannon, everything got canceled from the moment that call wasn't made, because that call is going to decide the football game. Everything that happened after that, you can go on and on about, that didn't happen.
But you under the impression that he was going to catch it. You thought Jackie Smith was going to catch that ball in the end zone against the Steelers too, didn't you?
Okay. Was it pass interference?
It was. Yes. We're not debating whether or not.
Did Mikel Roby Coleman think he was going to catch it? Yes, he did. He feared he was going to catch it and just waltz into
when
the
we
end
go
zone.
back to your favorite Super Bowl,
Okay.
did you think Jackie Smith was going to catch that touchdown?
Okay, but it didn't decide the game. It wasn't in the final seconds of the game.
But the fact you cannot.
I couldn't make a case that if he had caught it, that Dallas would have won the game.
Momentum
wound up
changed.
35-31 Pittsburgh. Okay? And it went back and
a touchdown and a field goal. Okay. So now who knows?
There was an egregious pass interference call on Benny Barnes. Do you remember this? So we can go back and forth, but I'm not going to, because none of those calls decided that game. And the truth was, on the football field that day, because I was there, 50-yard line in the press box, Pittsburgh was the better team on the field. And it was the greatest collection of talent in the history of Super Bowls, Dallas versus Pittsburgh. That year.
Had 9.
Okay?
Steelers had like 9 on one side.
And yet, Pittsburgh was just better than Dallas. They were 4 points better. So I don't have any problem with those drops or blown calls.
Skip. The thing is that there's so many, and we hear coaches all the time, we need to move on. You get a blown call, you have this, you have that, and coaches says, guys, one call didn't cost us the game. There are so many other plays we could, and here we are 3 months after the call actually happened, that Sean Payton, Skip, the Saints cannot move on if their head coach cannot move on. He can't change it. And even if they did institute the replay as we're talking about it today, to my knowledge, the play Sean Payton is talking about would not have been reviewable. So what is he still talking about? So
nothing's going to change.
No.
That's what he's talking about.
Yes.
They apparently are comfortable with what happened. And they are comfortably uncomfortable with it.
They would be uncomfortable with it had we saw this happen in week 10. We saw it again in week 13. We saw it the first round of the playoffs. We saw it in the NFC Championship game. But because we've only seen it once in the past 4 decades,